Welcome to the first official stream of Season 21 at Formula Racing League, and we're back with the effervescent Sunday Sprint Series. I'm Jack Prentice, and I this season will be your lead commentator for the season ahead, with the departed Greg Wood now going on to race, and we wish him well in that. He's currently top of the AM class, as you can see there. But it's a one-man band only, and that's not the only change that we have for Season 21 of 7 rounds, starting here at Kyalami, just to the north of Johannesburg. So you'll remember, regular racers and regular viewers will remember the reverse grid that was a feature for 3 or 4 seasons, I think it was. That's gone, so you've still got your 20-minute sprint, but your grid position or your grid positions are selected for both races. So you've got wherever you qualify for the 20-minute sprint is where you will also start for the 40-minute sprint. We're going to have a look now at Jared Vermeulen, who is one of the driver changes that I will mention it coming up as the series champion from last season. Whilst he is racing, as you can see here, he is doing so on a part-time basis and is in as a reserve. So you've got a couple of his old rivals, Demia van der Waal and Fabio Travaglioli. Easy for me to say, in the 2 Ferraris, just a quarter of a second off. They are both full-time in the Pro Class, will be, you would suspect, amongst the favourites to be duking it out for the Pro and indeed overall title coming up. You've got 2 drop scores one drop score as far as I'm aware now, in terms of you have 2 races that you will drop the score, but it will be only from your worst event. So you will have 6 scoring events for the championship, split 3 ways. You can see that the lighter shade, the silver shade and the red shade, that denotes what class you're in. So if you're in the lighter white shade, you were in the Pro class. If you're in the silver shade, as we can see, Richard Gearman and Renard Serfontaine at the top of that class, that is the silver, the intermediate tier, if you like. And if you've got the red band in your number, that means that you are in the AM class. So, like Greg Wood, Owen Harris, another former commentator here, and what a job those two did, by the way, whilst they were commentating to lay the foundations for what we've got here for the session and indeed for the season ahead. You've got then the third place driver, Jamie Thacker, in the Ford Mondeo there. That's striking black and grey Ford Mondeo, kind of like the Craig Lowndes Ford from the V8 supercar era of yesteryear. So we're expecting possibly up to 40 drivers here, with Chris Gedman and Miguel Silva, the latest two, to be joining in what will be some action-packed and exciting racing. We've got what should be wet conditions the whole way through, which is quite rare around Kyalami, obviously with its location in the south, in South Africa, and that should be another thing for the drivers to keep hold of. This very hilly, undulating circuits. We see Vermeulen on what is effectively home territory, going through Neukoop, down the hill and through the mine shaft. And we're expecting the pole position time to be around about that 1 minute 48.2 second barometer if the weather continues as is. We go now into the final sector. You've got the notorious curve coming up, having you through Cheetah. That's going to catch the less experienced drivers out in the dry with the sleeping policeman curb that you've got there. Never mind the fact that the curbs are that much more slippery. And we'll take you through the official driver the driver lineups for the Pro Class, and this won't include Jared Vermeulen, with Vermeulen obviously being a reserve driver. So do go with me whilst we get that loaded up. So we'll start with the Pro Class, which is Dan Crossman, who's the youngest driver. He's in the Ferrari Calibre 84 alongside Morgan Grace in the also in a Ferrari Calibre 40, and Adam Sharp, the third driver, in the McLaren. A dalliance with Honda did not bear fruit, so Adam Sharp going back to what he knows and will be a contender for sure. Wouter Heijmans is next in the Pro Class. He's a quick driver, not always delivering those results, but we think that he will be another one to certainly excite the fans there, as he does actually leave the pit lane just for a couple of minutes there. I suspect this will be an installation up with Andrew Eden in the Lexus as ever. Next on the list, you've got Vaca Pospashil and Fabio Travaglioli next, with Othman El Fidawi, a reserve last season. He was pretty prolific in the steward's office, but has shown a great turn of pace not available tonight, it would appear, with Johnny Sharp and Maximilian Basler also drive Ferraris in the Pro Class. Josh Clayton has changed from the traditional Alfa Romeo, Aston Martin, sorry, that he's usually in, and the man from Leicestershire will be hoping to make a bit of a splash in the Ford Mustang, car number 5 there, with the black and green trim, looking to see if that bears through after a sustained period in the Aston Martin. Steve Desert has moved up from the Silver Class and into the Pro Class, so the Flying Dutchman there getting his first taste of pro top-tier action, with Michael Brushtully, the Canadian, who's found life difficult in terms of results, if not pace, has always been one of the quicker drivers, but never been able to deliver on it. We've got a newcomer here in Demian van der Waal. I say a newcomer, he returns to the championship and indeed the league community, having been particularly prolific on Tuesday nights a couple of seasons ago. So we welcome him back, along with his father, Michel van der Waal, you can see in the McLaren in 20th position. So van der Waal Senior is in the Silver Class. Jaffrey Mullen has been added as a late, well, he's added as a reserve on here, but he does appear on the main list, so that shows me that's a developing story, I think it's fair to say, on opening night of the SIMNET Sunday SuperSprint series. We're going to go to the silver drivers now, and that's pretty much known as Admin Corner, with Gordon Brown and Luke Richings amongst those to be in the series, with Michel van der Waal, as we mentioned previously, also in the Silver Class. He's next, ahead of Serafino Camino and Chris Getman, again to admins, with Alexander Klugin making the step up to Silver Class, having impressed in the AM Class for so long. So the Russian there looking to make a big splash in the rain at the Kyalami circuit. Renard Serfontaine, as we mentioned earlier, towards the top end of the Silver Class, not always been able to deliver on that pace that he's shown, but if he can put it together, the South African should be a danger for the coming series. Lee Colpitts is in the BMW M4. He is not visible as of yet, ahead of Marco Lino and Jordan Marchal, moving up from the AM Class, the Frenchman who has been very colourful in his time at Formula Racing League, and he's looking to see if he can push on, having moved up into the FRL community, moved up into the silver community. We've got an Irish driver now who is a newcomer, and we welcome Terry Tierney in the Aston Martin V8 Vantage. He has been showing fairly solid pace throughout. His quickest laps have not been set in the ideal conditions, which is why he finds himself in 28th, ahead of James O'Leary, the British driver in the McLaren, car number 87. Again, expecting to see good things from those two newcomers, and we welcome them to Formula Racing League. As I've said so many times before, a notoriously difficult championship to debut in. Maximilian Borneveg is another driver who's rejoined the series for this season. He, the solid German, is in the Lamborghini Huracan, car number 442, with Richard Gearman at the top of the silver standings so far in the Ferrari 296 going as well. So we've got then the AM driver, with Darren Mark Davis in the Ford Mustang, former commentator, with his fellow Welshman Darren Townsend in the pink number 9 McLaren as per. Dale Kelleher, who can't race because of injury tonight, goes in the Ferrari car number 89, with Fian Kruger looking to build an impressive rookie season in the McLaren. Michael Coppens goes out in the Ferrari car number 36. It's a very popular car this season, but Jack Barnett, who debuted last season in the championship, looking to see if he can build on what was a difficult, more of a learning curve, I think, for the Aston Martin. He's in the Ford Mustang this time around, car number 13, with Paul Trotman and Jamie Thacker also in the mix. Dreadlock Steve, who was a bit rostrum or hospital last season, returns in the Aston Martin V8 Vantage, car 666, ahead of Miguel Silva and Jeffrey DeVos. Greg Wood swaps commentary box for the cockpit. He will be in the Aston Martin V8 Vantage as per. Expect him to go rather well, given his Tuesday showings, with Owen Harris and Jochen Verrett ahead of Ryan Fegan, the AM permanent driver. It's easy for me to say. Now, you're seeing a lot of cars go out early in the session. Now, the qualifying rule is that drivers are allowed only one lap. So once you've started your lap, that's it. You're committed. It's not something that the stewards take kindly to. If you do disobey, you have to have a pit lane start. and the stewards are very hot on that. But with the rain coming, as you can see, 5 minutes until it starts to rain, drivers who are still in the pit lane need to get out there, because we've got drivers such as Darren Townsend, Jamie Thacker and Greg Wood all coming down the hill into the mine shaft to try and get a space. And if they start ahead, whilst they're going to be in different classes, the AM class, they are also fighting for an overall championship. So it would make great sense for all of those drivers. You see nearly 40 cars, half of them are still in the pit lane, and it would make some sense for those to be getting out, because what you don't want to be doing is, especially if you're a pro driver such as Sheriff Mullen, who is right towards the end, the South African wily campaigner, as he usually is, getting himself a bit of space to deliver the lap. We're going to ride with Jared Vermeulen here in the Ferrari. It's the standard bearer, it must be said, over the past couple of Sunday seasons. Car number 1 in the green and black Ferrari. Now pulls the car over to the right hand side. Turn 1 doesn't really matter, but you're going into turn 2 at Crowthorne. Heavy braking. You can really brake quite late there and commit early to the apex. Have to leave a little bit on the exit because you don't want to tight turn 3, because that right hander will immediately lead you into turns 4 and 5 at Barbecue. Onto the back straight before the sweeping right hander at the end of the first sector. That is Sunshine Bend. You have to get this spot on. You can't really afford to be too quick, because if you're a couple of miles an hour too quick, you're off onto the grass, and that compromises your entry for turn at number 7. Now, a fairly short, sharp burst before a downhill S's section, where you really have to keep the car hooked in on the first left-handed apex before then let the car run free up the hill and on to Neukoop, which is at the top of the hill where it flattens out, so it makes the braking zone a little bit more difficult. You can take a couple of different lines there. He chooses to miss the first apex and straight line it coming out of the second apex at turn number 11. Down the hill we go through mine shaft, and this looked a very quick lap time for Vermeulen. You can see he's catching up as they go into the final pass at Barbecue. Now turns right here. Again, exit is probably the order of the day, because you've got then a short, sharp straight to the short, sharp right-hander at Cheetah Curve. Now, have to make sure that you don't hit the inside curb too hard, because Sleepy Policeman will put you in the gravel. Now into the final corner we go, and keep the car to the right-hand side with the short straight. And Jared Vermeulen, where's this going to be? Well, it's going to be pole by 1 minute 42.2. Jordan Marshall and Daniel Grossman are in a couple of seconds behind. Michel van der Waal is fourth at the moment. Second is Silver with Jack Barnett, having a bit of a difficult qualifying session. He's 14 seconds off the pace. Michael Coppens, meanwhile, goes up into fourth position, and first in AM at the moment. Greg Wood has hit trouble on his lap, so he won't be setting a lap. Michael Brush-Tully is another man to have hit problems, so he is out, and he is through into what is 10th position at the moment. Third in class at the moment. There's a bucket load of drivers still to complete their lap time. So what have we got here? 5 minutes. I suspect this might actually be one of the more lesser announced changes. So I will just double check and make sure that the one lap qualifying has gone out, although Vermeulen doesn't look like he's giving it everything, does he? Thomas Tierney goes up. That's an impressive lap time. Yes, so he is off, and that is his one attempt done. Thomas Tierney, impressive lap time for the Davison Irishman. 1.4 seconds off the pace. That is pole in silver class, so we can be very impressed with that. Going to go now to Owen Harris, who is midway through his lap, the Team Sky McLaren, so he's got a bit of a moving target to aim for, because Ampole is currently 13th place. Michael Coppens, 2.8 seconds. That's attainable for Owen Harris. We'll go back to that shortly. Car number 13 is coming across the line. I think that is an in-lap, so we're going to go to car 37. That is Adam Sharp. After his downlets with the Honda, what can he do? The Yorkshireman, who is currently 30th at the moment. Adam Sharp, is he beginning or is he ending the lap? I suspect that he's going to be beginning, because it's going to start raining very, very soon. Where does this go for Adam Sharp? It doesn't. It does go into fourth. He's behind Steve Desert in the Ferrari, but fourth place is a pretty solid effort with him ahead of Damien van der Waal. So he can certainly go racing there, the Yorkshireman, with Johnny Sharp up into 8th as well. So that's a good lap time here for the man newly in pro. Certainly got the pace to do that, so an impressive time. But from him, Jack Barnett meanwhile set a second lap time. I wonder if the stewards will look harshly upon that. Jetlock Steve now going into the first sector. We'll come back to him a little bit later on. Car 442 with Maximilian Borneveg as it starts to rain. Borneveg now down the mine shaft, going into the final corners, or the final section now. Keeps the car straight as he can. You don't really want that to be moving around too much under braking, but it's going to be difficult. He'll lose time in the final sector. Oh, Fidawi, meanwhile, up into 8th position in the Ferrari. Bit of a Ferrari fest, isn't it, in the top 10. 8 cars of the top 10 are Ferraris. Thomas Tierney and Adam Sharp very much the outliers here. Here is Borneveg across the line, the German. Where is he going to go? Currently 40th. Where is this going to put him? It's going to put him 32nd. The rain really coming down. It's already turned the track greasy, so I suspect that is a lap time hamstrung, really, by what happened there. Fabio Travaglioni, meanwhile, has not set a lap time. That is a bit of a blow for the Italian, because he was among the favourites to win the championship. Runner-up a couple of seasons ago. Combative Italian, not known for his patience. So coming through the field might be very eventful there for Travaglioni. He's going to start from 39th, ahead of only Greg Wood. Greg Wood, who will also be disappointed with his lap time, or lack thereof of lap time, is going to start from 40th, and he will be hoping to come through the field. A sensible head on Greg Wood's shoulders, certainly shown through his Taco Tuesday exploits, so we expect that he will be able to come through the field and perhaps challenge, not necessarily for the top end, because Owen Harris and Vian Kruger are a little bit further ahead, but certainly get into the points, and if he can, it'll be a successful afternoon. So Brush-Tully's the only man out there trying to get some laps. I guess get some experience on that, but I don't know whether that's going to be allowed. He is coming into the pits now. I suspect that's his one extra lap that you have. Obviously, the in-lap does not count towards your lap time total. Very tight pit entrance here, so it's very difficult for the driver, certainly on more of an endurance standpoint, to come in. Brush-Tully being 12th, I suspect that's because he set his lap time a little bit too late, because the Canadian has been showing a lot more pace than that. He's changed his car number for the season. He was car number 2, now car number 53, so hopefully that brings a little bit more luck, and I think that is everything. Obviously, with the weather not going to improve, so we do have a grid which we'll take you through a little bit later on as well before the race, with Jarrah Vermeulen on pole ahead of Daniel Crossman, with Sieb Desert into 3rd place. Gordon Brown, meanwhile, in the silver class, 4th in the Ferrari, car number 134. You expect that he will be able to make good on that, and the Scotsman, being one of the more sensible drivers out on circuit, won't go searching for trouble, so I suspect that he will do everything he can, keep a couple of cars but no more between him and Thomas Tierney in 9th. Adam Sharp is in 5th, 4th in the Pro Class ahead of Damien van der Waal, with Wouter Heijmans in 7th ahead of Omat El Fidawi on row 4. Thomas Tierney is in 9th in the Aston Martin, the Irishman debuting in the championship, and that is a very good start to his Formula Racing League career, with Johnny Sharp in 10th ahead of Richard Gearman and Marcelin Brush-Tully. Andrew Eden in the Lexus is in 13th, not the car for the conditions or indeed the circuit, but he will go racing from there. That car obviously very, very quick in the straight line, ahead of Porsche Michel, back in the Porsche once more. Been a difficult season last season for Porsche Michel, but you would expect that the Czech driver, very experienced and on his day, a very handy driver in the Pro Class, will be able to come through there, with Owen Harris at 15th, which is pole position for the AM class. An excellent drive from Harris, who's since he stopped and stepped away from the commentary scene 2 or 3 seasons ago, has given it, whenever he's been able to race, has been very impressive in that class. So I expect more of the same there. Michel van der Waal, obviously Van der Waal senior, the secondary Van der Waal, but the much older Van der Waal is 16th ahead of Renard Serfontein and Marcel Basler. Basler, who has been very impressive with his pace, not able to put it together on this occasion. Alexander Kalugin will start row 10 ahead of Vian Kruger, who's the second AM driver. Jordan Marshall and Chris Getman will share row number 11 with Liam Richings and Michael Coppens on row 12. Lee Colpitts is in 25th. He goes alongside James O'Leary, and the silver driver last season. Colpitts could consider himself a bit unfortunate not to win the championship. He was right in it until the final round, until problems at Spa, not of his own making, it must be said, caught up with him. Jeffrey DeFass and Jamie Thacker were on row 14 in the AM class. Josh Clayton in a bit of an out of position, 29th in Pro. He will be hoping to move forward, and he can. He's certainly quick enough to. He's starting alongside Miguel Silva with Darren Townsend and Maximilian Borneveg on row 16, headed by Colino and Ryan Fegan. Fegan, who's been on a pretty sharp upward curve since a few appearances in the off-season events, and he will be hoping to move forward from there. Jack Barnett and Darren Mark Davis making an all-forward row 18 with Dreadlock Steve and Paul Trotman on row 19 as the amps start to fit out towards the back of the grid. Fabio Travaglioni and Greg Wood, as we mentioned earlier, not setting a time and will be going right from the bat. We're just waiting now for ACC to load itself up and Assetto Corsa to do Assetto Corsa things and get us back to the start for race number 1, the 20-minute sprint series. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
We have some wet conditions. Remember that curves are slippery and watch your braking distance.
And no sooner do I say that the drivers are going to be needing to wait a little bit while, or a little longer, as the Formula Racing League SIMNET SuperSprint Sunday series kicks off, as the traditional Assetto Corsa delays from qualifying to race rear up, that they then make a complete mug of me and get me back to the start of the race. 2.5 minutes there for the drivers to have a little bit of a think. The track is wet, but it is light rain, so you're not going to want your tyre pressures to be too high. But you can see it starts to intensify in 5 minutes' time, but then gets slightly lighter in 15 minutes. So it's going to be fairly inconsistent. What you don't want is the tyres to be too hot, because if they're too hot, your car will move around and it becomes a never-ending story. If your tyres are too cold, it's something that you can be a little bit more aggressive with, especially as there starts to be a bit of a dry line, especially as the cars start to clear the water. And 40 cars will do that, as Greg Wood has said that the reason he's towards the back is that the cheetah curb got him. Well, we said it would get somebody, but one of the more experienced drivers and one of the better drivers from an AM point of view, it unfortunately has claimed. El Kelleher, we do say thank you to you as well. And we've got someone supporting their husband there above the sky. Welcome for car number 23. Car number 23 being Jordan Marshall. And we wish you and he all the best. Thank you so much for coming to watch us and making it possible for us to do what we do. Just a bit of time for me to include something else that helps us do what we do, and that is our Patreon server. It's £3.60 a month, about $4 a month, which is about half a Big Mac. You know, it's less really than a cheeseburger at McDonald's. So you pay that a month. Chris Gebman will do all sorts of designs for you if you so wish. You know, if you want to kit out your profile picture. But more importantly, you do help with the running of the league and the ability to put on all of these amazing championships for Taco Tuesday, for SIMNET SuperSprint Sundays, and indeed the Thursday night commentary that we've got new for this season. So thank you. If you do all of that, it pays for that and it makes sure that the league keeps turning. So that is our Patreon server, and admin will reach out to you if you leave a comment on the YouTube video to see how you can get involved with that. Somebody will reach out to you and we will make sure that if you want to contribute, you can. We've got 45 seconds now before the start of the first race, round number 1 of not just of the season, and indeed the first of our official commentaries for 2026. A couple of excellent commentaries I recommend that you take a look at as well from the off-season stuff, including the new Dornington and the GT2 GT4 mix from Bathurst, if you want to check those out a little bit later on. But first, we've got the main event now, so drivers have to start hitting drive and have to make sure that they are where they need to be, and the strategy is what they need it to be. Jaron Vermeulen leading from Daniel Crossman and Steve Desire, with Gordon Brown in 4th, the silver interloper ahead of Adam Sharp and Demian van der Waal. Hymans and El Fidari at the back of that lead group as well in 7th and 8th, with Thomas Tierney. Again, an excellent debut for Thomas Tierney in the qualifier, the yellow and blue, almost Leeds United look to that Aston Martin with Johnny Sharp in 10th. So that's your top 10. As you can see, the track really is quite treacherous despite that light rain. So Jaron Vermeulen there, he's very much the safety car, as well as what has often been the standard bearer. Pulling over to the right-hand side, give himself as much space as he possibly can, leading from Crossman. And we're now waiting for everybody to get round, waiting to get to the start-finish line. And we will be underway very shortly. We're underway now. Jared Vermeulen gets a good start. Can Crossman get a better start? No, he's going to go around the outside. Vermeulen's got the legs on him at the moment. But Steve Desire and Gordon Brown, as well as Adam Sharp, coming down the inside. Sharp now looking to see if he can get up into third position. He's cut off by Desire. Nothing wrong there at all. And I think he's been blocked off as Gordon Brown makes his way around. Damien van der Waal makes his way around as well in the Sky Ferrari, I think that is, as they all come through. But Jared Vermeulen leads, and leads away well from Daniel Crossman. Crossman, the youngest driver, but by no means the slowest driver on the grid, as you can see there in second position, trying to see if he can get a move done into Sunshine, but he can't. And Damien van der Waal has held on to third position. Adam Sharp has, I think, fallen backwards he goes. He is towards seventh. I think he's hit or been hit by Steve Desire. We'll certainly see how that works out a little bit later on. Damien van der Waal, meanwhile, in third, ahead of Gordon Brown in the Sky Ferrari, who has retained fourth, but he's lost his buffer because Thomas Tierney, while 3 seconds back, is in fifth position, second in silver class, with Omar El Fadawi in sixth, and Andrew Eden up from 13th into seventh. They go into Nui Coupe. The Lexus driver has had an amazing start. He's ahead of Johnny Sharp, who's himself gained a couple of positions. Marcel Basler up from 18th on the grid in Pro. He is up into ninth position, with Bakla Poshbajul following him behind, and Renat Serfontaine in 11th on the podium in the AM class, as I think the two AM drivers have come together. So Vin Kruger's come through, but Owen Harris is in strife, and he's in strife at the S's. That car going no further. What was an excellent pole lap from the AM class has been rather sent to the glue factory, I'm afraid, because Owen Harris has dropped all the way to the back. There's a couple of cars who've ported to pits as well. Car 104, that's Liam Richings, who has also hit problems there. Jeffrey DeFaas is another man to be in trouble. Josh Clayton towards the back of the grid, he's also got problems as well. Look at that front end all bent in and bunched up. Not what you want to see, with Ryan Fegan as well having to come in and make to the pits. Is he? No, not quite. He's going to stay out, but go back to the lead with Omar El Fadawi, the lead group, is in sixth position. Is he able to get past Thomas Tierney? He has, but Tierney still in second in silver as El Fadawi, who was out of position really in third, has made his way through. Johnny Sharp is up into seventh. Andrew Eden in the Lexus has been shuffled back to eighth, hasn't he, with Marcel Basler in ninth, ahead of Akbar Poshbajul. Johnny Sharp in seventh, now trying to see if he can take on the top six. Obviously fifth in the Pro class, you can tell, as we discussed earlier on, by the lighting or the shade of his number. So if it's the lighter shade, it's in Pro. If it's the silver or grey shade, it is the silver class, the medium class, and if it's red, it is AM. Red is led by Jamie Thacker, who's gone up. He was third, wasn't he, on the grid? He's ahead of Mikael Silva. Silva was 30th, wasn't he? Which was about 5th or 6th, certainly in the AM class. He certainly had a stonking race, the Luxembourg driver. Jimmy Thacker third, not on the main grid, but third in AM. Bit of damage, I think, but that just looks like rubbing his racing there on the Mustang. And the Craig Lowndes-inspired livery lives to fight another day. He's got, I think, Adam Sharp behind him. Miguel Silva has just been deposed by Adam Sharp. Sharp in 21st at the moment. Not what the Yorkshireman wanted, with him starting 5th overall and 4th in class. And he's now got a bit of work to do in that McLaren. It's a McLaren that he's very much at home in, but he's going to have to get his skates on. Now, Thomas Tierney obviously dropping back a couple of seconds nearly from El Fadawi. El Fadawi's not in his race, but he has got Johnny Sharp and Andrew Eden behind the Lexus. They're having to go offline in order to see where he's going. The side-by-side action, that's Basler versus Poshbajul. Poshbajul just about makes it through ahead of Bristoli, as Basler actually having a look at the Lexus of Andrew Eden. Eden putting himself out of position when he went to the inside there. Bit of a tighter line, and now Basler, who's in the German-inspired livery, has some work to do, not only forwards but backwards, as Poshbajul tries to go around the outside. The Czech driver, can he fall back into place? Can. He's gone ahead, or remains ahead of Marcelin Bristoli. Bristoli, though, very interested in the goings on ahead. If he can, as the Ferrari of Basler has spun. I think he just dropped it. There's a little bit of contact between him, Brusciulli, and Pospisil. Brusciulli's going to go to the inside, and Basler, I think, has dropped to 12th position. He's certainly behind 10th and 11th, Pospisil and Brusciulli. I think when our servant as Brusciulli now goes off, further problems there for the Canadian. He's going to drop back 2 or 3 positions as well. This is great news for drivers like Bernard Serfontaine going up into New Coit, but while he's not gained in many positions in class, he certainly is overall. I think, though, that he's going to have further problems with his stablemate, Wouter Heijmans. Heijmans there having a bit of a difficult start to the race, but he's back into 13th. Travaglioni, meanwhile, has made his way up into 13th overall, as I think the damage to Brusciulli's race is not terminal. He's only back 3 or 4 positions, but Basler, having dropped it, as I think Pospisil was probably the worst. Yeah, he was probably the big loser in that. Didn't see that on the camera because of the camera angle that we had, but Pospisil dropping all the way back to 17th, whereas Basler, who started it all off with dropping nothing malicious at all and certainly nothing penalisable, but unfortunately for Basler, or fortunately for Basler, he remains in 9th and he remains 7th overall. So this will give a bit of hope to drivers like Andrew Sharp, who's just gone onto the back of Jamie Thacker, whilst they are not in the class battles. I think Thacker has just let him go around the outside. A sensible driving all round, trying to avoid collisions. Now Sharp can see the rest of his class. He can see Desert, he can see Pospisil, and he can see Travaglioni if he looks hard enough. Meanwhile, towards the front, you have to say that Vermeulen hasn't gotten away, has he? He's back out. Well, he's just behind Luke Richings. Richings and Admin is a lap down, so out there trying to complete a few more laps because of the damage that he sustained. He's completely out of it. But Vermeulen there needs to get by, and needs to get by well. Obviously, he should have blue flag help if Richings, who is only a couple of tenths ahead, really, isn't he? You'd expect the Admin to be getting out of the way, but no, not at this moment in time, as Vermeulen now has to overtake offline and go down the inside there, as Richings there, understandably a bit frustrated, but not the most helpful to the race leader. Daniel Crossman, meanwhile, is looking backwards rather than forwards, as Demian van der Waal is just behind in the 3rd Ferrari of 6, all in the top 6. So van der Waal in 3rd position has designs on 2nd, and can he use Crossman's lack of age against him? Van der Waal a lot older than Crossman, but Crossman certainly one of the quicker drivers, a very raw driver, but a very quick driver nonetheless, as Omar Al-Fadawi has got past Gordon Brown, has he? Thomas Tierney's dropped all the way back to 8th, but remains 2nd in class, as Gordon Brown leaves it all very sensible there, thank you very much. Johnny Sharp and Andrew Eden are about 3 seconds back, so nothing for the Scotsman to worry about as we get to halfway through the SIMNET round number 1, the SIMNET SuperSprint Sunday, racing at Kyalami. So we're already halfway through, nearly 12 minutes left to go, 8 minutes gone, so about 40% of the way through, and you have to say that Vermeulen is doing Vermeulen things. So you've got the Ferrari, the green, bright green Ferrari, starting to stretch away. Sometimes he'd do this where he'd just ease himself into the race, but you can see there that Crossman, while he's not going away with Van der Waal all over the back of him, you have to say that Vermeulen is very much the favourite for the race. As Crossman goes slightly wide, so there's a bit of disconnection, trickery there, but they are going side by side between himself and Van der Waal. Van der Waal falls back in. I don't know whether there was any contact there, but the Dutchman reneges on a run down the mine shaft. Pretty sensible stuff. They've dropped nearly a second, so I do wonder if there is connection issues there at play, because certainly there are some drivers who are moving around just a little bit more, so we'll certainly see if there's any other issues there. Certainly nothing to do with the stream. The stream seems all okay, but Crossman and Van der Waal struggling a bit when it comes to connection. So Vermeulen now still 2.8 seconds across the line. Is he? No, that's going to grow to, yes, it's 2.8 seconds. Van der Waal dropping back a few tenths. I don't know whether that was the rubber band in 4th, with Omar Al-Fadawi in 4th. Gordon Brown still in 5th position ahead of Eden. Johnny Sharp, meanwhile, is in strife, is he? He's just coming down the mountain now, and well, he's not coming down the mountain, he's very much in the wall and out of the race. So the Ferrari there, having had an accident down the mine shaft, which happens. It's certainly one of the worst corners of the game to go off on, but Sharp there with plenty of damage, and unfortunately we'll be going no further. That does promote Thomas Tierney into 7th position ahead of Marcel Basler. Basler recovering from a poor qualifier by his standards. He's up into 8th position now, and the German in 6th position in class will be very satisfied with how the race panned out. With another man who will also be satisfied is Renat Serfontein, head of his stablemate Wouter Hyman. Serfontein 3rd in silver and 9th overall, with Wouter Hyman's behind, who was coming for a little bit of criticism, but did also get shortlisted, as there is some issues there. Perfect timing, isn't it? Gerson, the commentator for Renat Serfontein, we said that he was going to be happy with the race as it was, but not anymore, as Serfontein drops it at the S's, which has been very treacherous so far. A poor old Wouter Hyman. There's further issues. Travaglioni's in strife, and there's a couple of Porsches getting together for good measure as well. Barclay Bristolli is not one of those, but I think it's Pospisil and Chris Getman. Chris Getman still trying to shake off the attentions of what looks to be Jordan Marshall. Now coming down the straight, Travaglioni is well off and into the weeds, and Noni now coming back onto the circuit alongside another stricken Ferrari in Serfontein. Serfontein, who had some issues as well, started that off really, didn't he? But further problems there for a couple of the Ferrari cohort, and for Travaglioni, it's not the return to Sunday racing that he wanted, and well, that was all a bit exciting, wasn't it? I think the car 777 is now in the pits. That is, well, it's Johnny Sharp is in after his issues earlier on. That's Owen Harris, obviously, with his further problems. Tom City, you can see in the background, going slightly wide. Travaglioni, though, is back to 25th. Now, that promotes Steve Desire and Adam Sharp up into 15th and 16th. So, the two pro drivers that are on a bit of a recovery drive, of course, Getman, who was sideways there, along with Marco Lino and Vaclav Pospisil. That all came to a bit of a head up the top at Nieuwkoop. It's one of those that, because it's so narrow, any little bit of contact at the top where it flattens out can cause a bit of a chain reaction, because drivers have to go off and avoid, try and go offline and avoid. That's what's happened here as Marshall now under attack from Sharp. Now, Sharp, obviously in the pro class, won't want to do too much damage to the silver cars standing, but it's requires a bit of a dance to be done, because obviously no driver wants to get out of the way, but obviously with these being from different classes, you would expect that there may be a little bit more quarter given, as Sharp now goes up the hill. The McLaren, not the quickest, but Marshall runs sensibly, gets out of the way, and I think as allows Steve Desire is off, and into the weeds goes Chris Getman. Chris Getman there handing a position of 13th to that's Adam Sharp, but also, more importantly, Jordan Marshall has got past the Flying Scotsman, so Chris Getman there off at the top of the hill and back to 15th now, as Marshall has taken what he was hoping to take about a lap ago. He's certainly been able to take that now, as Chris Getman is back to what will be 16th and 17th behind Desire and Kalugin. Kalugin looking to have a go at this, but that is a disaster for the Flying Scotsman, and what was 4th position in silver is now possibly, well, it's certainly 6th, and it might be 7th if Kalugin gets his way. So Alexander Kalugin 17th, only a 10th behind the Porsche. That's not quick down the straight. The Russian's going to line him up and send a rocket down the inside, and he should get the move done if he's not too late on the brakes. Getman tries to cut across to make it as tight as possible. There's contact, I think. Nothing doing there. I think that's two drivers meeting in the middle, but Kalugin takes 16th and takes 6th overall. So Getman was 4th, now 7th in silver, drops to 17th. So Steve Desire is the next man up for Alexander Kalugin, but the man that he'll be looking at most of all is Jordan Marshall. And now Adam Sharp has got Marco Lino to get after, and if he does get Lino, then you've got 3 Porsches ahead. That's Bristolli, Pospisil and Hyman, all of whom have got either some damage or have had some rather eventful races at the moment. So all's not lost for the Yorkshireman, but out front, Jared van Meulen has started to stretch that gap, hasn't he? He's got 6 minutes to go. We'd say that's probably about 4 laps with the way that the clock is, and he has got 4 seconds on Daniel Crossman, who's certainly not looking forwards, he's looking backwards. And that's Demian van der Waal on his return to the championship. Looks like he's going to make it a podium first time out. Omar Al Fidawi, meanwhile, the Italian in the Ferrari, is fourth, and he's keeping it rather sensible, having had a bit of an eventful start to his Formula Racing League career. He's had a bit of eventful start last season as a reserve. He's certainly toned it down a bit, and that is to his credit. Gordon Brown, meanwhile, not mentioning much recently, but fifth position means at the moment class win. He's got Andrew Eden behind. Eden has nothing to gain by going too silly against Gordon Brown, and he's one of the more sensible drivers on the grid, Andrew Eden, so you would expect that he won't be going bumper car racing, and it is, so far has been, an excellent debut from Thomas Tierney. Thomas Tierney in 7th position overall in the silver class. He is in 2nd position, so podium on debut. Certainly nothing to be sniffed at. I was talking about how difficult this league is to debut in, as Jack Barnett found out last season. But he's taken to it like a duck to water, Thomas Tierney. So good on him for what has been a rather impressive return to form. You've got now Marcel certainly a rather impressive start to the championship, not return to form. Marcel Basler, meanwhile, is on about a return to form, driving with such pace in the last couple of seasons. He's been competing without the results to back it up. The Ferrari driver now currently 6th in standings. We go and see if we can find a battle. It's Greg Wood. I mentioned that he probably wasn't going to be coming through for the win in Am. Well, I was wrong there, wasn't I? The man who started last, 40th on the grid, having come a cropper at the cheetah curb and the sleeping policeman corner, now is all over the back of Jamie Thacker. And Greg Wood, formerly of this commentary parish, is now going to see if he can take the real estate that is first position. He's going around the outside there at Neuco. Can he cut back? That's Alexander Kalugin recovering, so he's had an attempt, I think, at Jordan Marshall and failed. The Russian who was dropped back, Chris Gebman, has gone up into 15th place as a result. There's been a couple of others fall by the wayside. Greg Wood, meanwhile, has a look down the inside. Does he? No, not quite. He's got Dreadlock Steve behind him as well. So this battle for the AM podium, really, it's the AM lead, 2nd place and 3rd place. They're all right together. Dreadlock Steve now having a go at Greg Wood, but Wood is looking as much forward as he is backwards. The Aston Martin, if he can get a good run on the Ford Mustang ahead, he might be able to get past, because the Mustang does look like it's got a little bit of damage, but nothing too bad. Now Wood gets in behind. He's a quarter of a second. He's in the slipstream, and I suspect if he's brave enough on the brakes, he might fancy a go. He does go to the inside, but brakes slightly earlier. Thacker brakes late, but is he going to go too wide? He is, you know. And Wood, is he going to be able to get alongside? No, not quite, but he can stay just on the shoulder of the Mustang. But the Mustang is, by virtue of having the inside, able to crowd out the Aston Martin, and that is that, possibly until the Sunshine Bend coming up. Now, the Aston certainly looks the quicker car, doesn't it? You've got Kalugin behind, having got past the head of Dreadlock Steve. So Kalugin, having recovered, obviously, from his off, is on the move again. But will he want to be getting involved in this? I don't think I would, to be honest. Not much to gain. But Wood now 17th overall, 2nd in the AM class, certainly fancies a win here. So Thacker has got to be on his, well, he's got to be on it. He's got to have his wits about him, hasn't he? The Ford Mustang driver, with Wood now climbing up the hill. And is he going to be able to pull off a move to the inside? It would favour the Aston Martin braking performance, and he does go down the inside. Further contact there, because Thacker, trying to cut back, I think has been hit by Kalugin. I said he wasn't trying to get involved. I got that wrong, didn't I? Because Wood is able to make good his escape. Jamie Thacker, meanwhile, it's disaster for the AM leader, or the former AM leader. He was doing so well, and through no fault of his own, his race is pretty much run. Darren Townsend, meanwhile, has taken up the mantle of 2nd place. That's because he's got past Dreadlock Steve, who was involved in that issue, in that incident up at the top at Neucope. And you've got Richard Gearman ahead of Fabrizio Travaglioni. Travaglioni trying to work his way back through the field. It's going to be to no avail, really, because the closest car to him is 13th place Adam Sharp. He's not going to gain that many places in what will probably be 2 laps with the leader there, as Jared Vermeulen has gone off. Jared Vermeulen is off, and we've missed that for the lead, but Daniel Crossman, who was 2nd earlier on, and Jared Vermeulen proves that he is human. Pole position, but he's now in 3rd position after being 4 seconds clear at one point, only a couple of moments ago whilst we were watching the AM battle. Jared Vermeulen has gone off, and that's not something you usually say. So Damien van der Waal is off as well. So it's going to be Daniel Crossman. He's going to potentially take the victory here, because Damien van der Waal, who was challenging going into the top of the hill, going up the top at Neukoop, is now off. And he is not quite, well, he's not going to be behind El Fidawi, so it's not going to ruin his race. But what was second is now third, and what was a chance at the win, that's gone. Because Vermeulen, let's say this touching wood, won't make the same mistake twice. Crossman now is going to have to do one more lap to get the win secured, because we crossed the line with only 10 seconds to go. So Daniel Crossman is, well, he's got one lap really, and he's got thereabouts 2 minutes to hang on, and he's got to make sure that he doesn't make too many mistakes. Can't see any damage on Vermeulen's car, but Crossman has always been quite strong in the final sector, so him getting a 10th on Vermeulen is not a total surprise. Van der Waal, meanwhile, looks like he's got plenty of damage, so he's got to bring that car home in third position. We're going to go back to the battle for fourth, because Omar El Fidawi has been caught by Andrew Eden. Eden has got past Brown. I suspect Brown has waved him through, but he has got Eden. Well, he's got a bit of work to do, isn't he? But the Lexus, there's one car that can outpace anybody down the straight. It is the Lexus. So the Ferrari ahead, getting a bit of a slipstream from the Mercedes. Not quite sure who that is. You've got, I think that might be Fegan in the AM class. You've got Gordon Brown. It's going to take a fairly comfortable silver win after all the mayhem around him. Marcel Buzzard's in 7th. Mark Brush-Tully has been deposed from 8th by Vaclav Hospital. We've just seen that come up as Wouter Heijmans has now completes the top 10. Plenty of drivers now in the pits, obviously through their various battles. Thomas Tierney's dropped to 11th, but sensible driving from the Irishman, new to the championship for this season. He's going to be 2nd overall in the silver class and 11th overall, with Adam Sharp 10th in class and 12th overall, which represents a bit of a save really for the Auctionman, with him having been towards the back on lap number 1. We're gonna go, I think we got a battle, I think for 20th. No, that's class on class, because Silver has been passed, I think, again by Alexander Kalugin. He's been in the wars, the Russian, with Lee Colpitts now, I think, a second behind Renat Serfontaine. There's more damage and dog ears than you can shake a stick at. But we go to the leaders. Daniel Crossman crosses the line to take an unlikely victory and an excellent victory. He made no mistakes, whereas those around him, including Jared Vermeulen, did make mistakes. He's 2nd ahead of Damien van der Waal, with Omar El Fidawi holding on for 4th ahead of Andrew Eden. Gordon Brown is going to take an impressive silver win. That is pretty dominant from the Flying Scotsman. He takes 6th overall and a win in silver. Marcel Basler beats Vaclav Hospital to 7th. Mark Brush-Tully is in 8th ahead of Wouter Heijmans. And we're going to give a cheer to Thomas Tierney, who finishes in 11th because he's 2nd in the silver class. Adam Sharp finishes 12th ahead of Jordan Marshall in 13th. That's 3rd and a podium in silver. So well done from the Frenchman, with Chris Gebman taking 4th when he was 7th earlier on following further collisions. So 14th for Chris Gebman, 4th overall. And Greg Wood takes the victory in the AM class, having started right at the very back. So the former commentator, turns out he's a pretty handy driver too. He's ahead of Dreadlock Steve in 2nd in AM and 16th overall. Richard Gibbon in 17th. The Dutchman, it not quite going as he would have hoped. Darren Townsend is in 8th. So he dropped back behind Dreadlock Steve in 18th. He's 3rd in the AM class, with Fabio Travaglioli in 19th ahead of Alexander Kalugin in 20th. Miguel Silva was 21st to finish 4th in the AM class ahead of Jack Barnett in the Mustang for this season. He was 5th in the AM class, and he was 22nd overall ahead of Michael Coppens in 23rd, with Renat Serfontaine in 24th ahead of Vian Kruger in 25th. Lee Colpitts had a difficult start race in 26th ahead of Josh Clayton in 27th, with Brian Fegan in 28th. Maximilian Borneveg, it was a bit of a difficult qualifying session for him, and it's proven that way in the race. He will be 29th. I know it says 28th, that's all that's left, with Jeffrey DeFars back in the hutch in 30th ahead of James O'Leary, the debutant, proving what I did say about it being a difficult championship to debut in. He finishes in 30th in silver, with Sieb Desert in 32nd. Now, that is Michel van der Waal in 33rd ahead of Jamie Thacker. Jamie Thacker, so unlucky. He was leading, and whilst the move on him seemed fair enough from Greg Wood, the problems later on as he goes to 34th now, after all of that, the problems later on were not caused by Jamie Thacker, with Marco Lino a little bit further back behind Paul Trotman. Liam Richings, Johnny Sharp, Owen Harris, who was leading earlier on, and Darren Mark Davies are also lapped I will be back with you very, very shortly indeed. Welcome back to to the second race, race number 2. 3.5 minutes to go, and look at that rain. As you thought it was wet in race number 1, that is nothing compared to the conditions that we've got for race number 2. And it's going to be 40 minutes of flat-out racing, certainly much less in the way of strategic concerns to be considered here in terms of what you do with your tyre pressures. You just got to keep them as perfect for heavy rain as you possibly can, because as it's not going to get much lighter. Now, as we mentioned earlier, that means there's no change in the race grid. So what was before, what used to be the case that you would have a full reverse grid for all drivers who completed up to 75% of the race 1 race distance. None of that now. What you've got is effectively the qualifying situation, the qualifying positions from the original qualifying session, which means there's no change, and that sets your position for both race number 1 and race number 2. So we're going to go through and just give you a little refresh of what that starting grid was, with Jared Vermeulen, who made such an uncharacteristic mistake there, didn't he, in race number 1. He will go from pole position, so he's got a chance to go and redress that balance. The South African, who is back with us after previously hinting that he might not be able to. He's racing full-time for the season, it would appear. Daniel Crossman, who won race number 1 after expertly judging the conditions, he will go from second on the grid, ahead of Steve Desert in third position, and Gordon Brown in fourth, the first of the silver class. Gordon Brown will be going from fourth position. Adam Sharp is in 5th in the first of the non-Ferraris, and the McLaren. He's shown the pace. If he can marry that up with a bit of luck, he should be good to go, ahead of Damien van der Waal in 6th. Wouter Heijmans is in 7th on the grid, ahead of Omat El Fidawi in 8th, whilst row 5 is Thomas Tierney in 9th, and Johnny Sharp in 10th. Richard Gibbon starts row 6. He is 11th and 3rd in the silver class, ahead of Marcelin Brustulli, with Andrew Eden and Owen Harris, the first of the AMs, in 13th and 14th. Michel van der Waal is 15th, ahead of Renard Serfontaine in 16th, with Marcel Basler in 17th in the pro category. He'll be starting ahead of Vian Kruger. There's a couple of drivers who have not appeared, so Chris Gebman will start in 19th, ahead of Liam Richings in 20th. Michael Coppens goes from 21st, ahead of Lee Colpitts in 22nd in the orange BMW. James O'Leary is 23rd, ahead of Jeffrey Defarge in 24th, with Jamie Thacker starting from 25th in the AM class. He should be a threat for the win, certainly if his form from most of the first part of the race starts to stack up. He's ahead of Josh Clayton in 26th, with Miguel Silva in 27th, ahead of Darren Townsend in 28th. Maximilian Mornevego in 29th, ahead of Marco Lino in 30th, Ryan Fegan 31st, and Jack Barnett in 32nd. Dreadlock Steve goes from 33rd, ahead of Paul Trotman, with Fabio Travaglioni in 35th, ahead of Greg Wood. Now, 3 or 4 drivers have dropped out and have started from the back. They are Darren Mark Davies and Jordan Marshall, with Alexander Kalugin starting from 39th, having been involved in earlier race-ending collisions. Now, what's going on here? Why is that change? I think we are going to be viewing the start of the race from a slightly different topic. So it's Jamie Thacker that we've ended up driving on. So we will go straight to the garage at this moment, or straight to the garage a little bit later on, and you're going to see the race start from the middle of the pack. So I do apologise for that. I don't quite know how that jumped, looped and happened. But we're now going through the first corner with a couple of drivers starting from the pit lane, and we're getting towards the start-finish line now. So we should be underway very, very quickly. And as you can see there, we are... Go, go, go. And that is still a good start from Jared Vermeulen. He looks like he's got the drop on Daniel Crossman. Crossman, though, slightly better than he was at the start of the last race in the slightly drier conditions. You can see Adam Sharp looking for a way through on the inside. I think Vermeulen's going to take it into turn 1, although he has got Crossman just on his shoulder, and he should now fall in. The Ferraris very close together, so I think it is going to be Vermeulen that wins out there. So Crossman's in second position, ahead of Steve Desert. Steve Desert making rather benefits of it than he did in race number 1, with Gordon Brown under pressure from Adam Sharp. There's a speeding ticket already for car number 41. Car number 41 is Fabio Travaglioni, so he started from the pit lane and he's going no further really. He's behind Maximilian Morneveg, who's dropped, I think, as well. He's quite far back, but Travaglioni, already it's over before it's even begun. Now Adam Sharp is just ahead of Wouter Heijmans. He's glided before in the past, but Heijmans looking to be a bit more circumspect than he's previously been. Johnny Sharp is up into 8th place once again, so good start from the Englishman. He's ahead of Marcelin Brustulli, who has got ahead of Thomas Tierney and Andrew Eden. So Brustulli up into 9th position, the Canadian, making a very good start. Now, can the Porsche make the most of it? He's got ahead a couple of silver drivers. Well, the Serfontaine's dropped to 13th. Great start, though, for Owen Harris, who's gone lawn mowing, though, coming out of turn number 11, coming out of Neukoop. Is he going to be able to hang on to that? He is going to be able to hang on to the lead in the AM class, because he's got Vian Kruger just behind him, hasn't he? He's got Marcel Basler attacking Harris. Basler's slotted into 14th. There's a couple of drivers off, I think. That's Johnny Sharp, and that is Wouter Heijmans, who's gone off. So those two were 7th and 8th. I wonder if Heijmans has been hit by Sharp, because Sharp's front end did look a little bit bent in, but I won't cast too many aspersions, because that's what the stewards are there for. Vermeulen, though, has already built a 1.5 second gap, so the South African a little bit happier in these conditions than he was in the drier conditions a little bit earlier on. Crossman is in second, ahead of Van der Waal. So Damien van der Waal has come through again to be third, having started 6th position. So the Dutchman certainly want to watch on the opening laps. You've got Steve Desert now in 3rd position. The Dutchman now holding up Gordon Brown. Well, no, not really. That's a bit of time. He's just ahead of Gordon Brown. With Adam Sharp now having a look up the inside going into the Sunshine Bend. I say Sunshine Bend is a bit of an ironic name, isn't it, really, at this moment in time, at Sunset Bend, because certainly not much in the way of sunlight. Now, you've got Aujourd'hui up into 7th, ahead of Thomas Tindy. That's obviously where the other drivers sorted themselves out. That's Johnny Sharp in 13th, and that's Hunt in 16th, with Renard Serfontaine in 3rd in class overall, and hoping to build on pace, if not result, because having gone off at the S's when well placed, Serfontaine, we will be hoping he can make good on the obvious place within that Ferrari. It's Adam Eden in 10th, ahead of Owen Harris. Harris is in 11th, but he's leading the AM class, which is the most important. Darren Townsend is in 15th. He's 2nd in the AM class, and he's just behind Michel van der Waal. So Van der Waal Senior has got ahead of Townsend. Townsend, who has been a threat for the championship in the AM class in the last couple of seasons, and in the all-pink machine, the Pink Panther, as some may call it, he is certainly riding high. Standards, I think that's Johnny Sharp off again. So the turn number 12 and 13 and the mine shaft going into the final bend, not his friend at all. That is the Crocodile's corner, and it certainly proves to be a bit snappy for him going into the final complex. So there's a couple of drivers that are already in the pit lane, so a few drivers have hit problems. The man in strife is car number 87, I can see, and he's just got back going again. That might be car 187, that might be Jeffrey DeFast, with that front end looking certainly the worst for wear. Travaglioli, Kruger and Silva are all in the pits with Jamie Thacker. Oh, it's a disaster, isn't it? What was looking so promising for Jamie Thacker has turned into a bit of a nightmare. Vaclav Pospisil and Travaglioli are in the pits as well as Paul Trotman. So only 33 drivers that are circulating on anything close to the lead lap. I'm going to go to the front because in 5 minutes, Vermeulen's done what he did in 15, thereabouts, in terms of building a gap. He's already 3.5 seconds clear of Daniel Crossman, and Demian van der Waal has designs on second position, doesn't he? Because van der Waal, I think he thinks if he can get past Crossman, he can get after Vermeulen, who's a bit of a master in these conditions, but van der Waal certainly very quick on his day. So if van der Waal can depose Crossman, then I suspect that he'll be in business, certainly or possibly, for a race win. Steve Desert, meanwhile, has held up Gordon Brown a little bit. Gordon Brown now certainly in the clutches of Marklin Brustulli. So Brustulli, combative Canadian, has come through in the Porsche as it catches up as we go into the Crocodiles. He's ahead of Adam Sharp. Sharp dropping back to 7th. Certainly nowhere near as disastrous as it was in race number 1, but the Yorkshireman not having the pace that he thought he might have in that McLaren, certainly this time around. So Brustulli now lining up Brown down the inside of the final corner, not able to make it stick, but the Porsche has got such good traction. Is he going to be able to get past the Ferrari? The Ferrari did go offline. That's Gordon Brown slightly offline, and he could be vulnerable to an attack from Brustulli. Brustulli having trimmed the wing possibly off that Porsche to get a little bit more straight line speed. Down the inside we go, and I think Brown is going to let him go because obviously they're not in the same race, although he's going to let him go past the corner. Now they're going to go 3 wide because Brustulli has outbraked himself, and he's going to pay for that, certainly losing out to Brown. But is he going to lose out to Adam Sharp? No, he managed to shut the door on the Englishman in the McLaren, but that's also going to cause problems with Thomas Tierney. Thomas Tierney having a good start to the race, having already gotten 2nd place in race number 1, and Brustulli now goes slightly, but no, that's Tierney going slightly wide, isn't it? So Sharp has to settle for 7th at this moment in time, but Brustulli there having a bit of a run at Brown, but not able to make it stick, and certainly a bit of a dress rehearsal. I suspect that Brustulli, given how quick that Porsche has been in the race so far, might be looking to, as I think Vermeulen's gone off again. He has. Yes, he has. And Daniel Crossman again. So Vermeulen, 2 races, 2 mistakes. That's rare as hen's teeth, isn't it? With Vermeulen going off and into the weeds, and certainly now back behind not only Daniel Crossman, but he's behind Van der Waal. Now, Van der Waal did make a mistake in race number 2, but Dutchman's got to lock in because he's got a potential win on his hands. He's been quicker than Daniel Crossman, and Vermeulen now won't take kindly to seeing cars in front of him. It's a bit of an unusual sensation for him so far, unless he's in a reverse grid race. But when he's starting pole, normally that's it, beginning, middle and end. Unfortunately, the middle for Jared Vermeulen has hit problems. He's got Steve Desert, though, back behind at 2 seconds, so he can afford to just settle in with it being half an hour left in what is a pretty awful conditions, I suspect that Vermeulen will be certainly still having a say for the race win. Meanwhile, Marco Brustilli going again on Gordon Brown. No, not quite. He's only 6 tenths of a second behind us. Brown does go wide, so Brown does what Brustilli did. Now, is Brustilli going to be able to make the move? No, Brown does just about hold on. Keeps the car very nicely settled. He's done that rather well, Gordon Brown. And the experienced Scotsman who was dropped to the silver tier. Some might say that he's perhaps a pro-level driver, but silver is where he is, and silver is where he's dominating at the moment. He's got Brustilli behind him. The combative Canadian has so far raced pretty cleanly, apart from obviously sending it down the inside, but no contact there, so no issues. Brustilli now in 6th overall, but he needs to get the move done because you can see the gap between Desire and Brown is growing, and the gap between Vermeulen and Desire is growing. So Brustilli, who's quick enough to be in the top 4, needs to get his skates off. He's got behind Tierney and Serpentine. Thomas Tierney's gone off. So Tierney has gone off behind. He was threatening to do that through Sunset Bend a few times, wasn't he? And he's gone off and he's dropped, I would estimate, to about 14th to 15th, 3rd in class. That's Renard Serpentine, who is in 8th position and now 2nd in silver. Owen Harris, meanwhile, making up for what was an awful first race results-wise. He is leading the AM class still, and he's got a bit of time between when he's got Basler 1.5 seconds behind. Marcel Basler just goes slightly wide there, going into the Crocodile corner, but he's got about 5 seconds between himself and Darren Townsend. And in the AM category, as supposed sometimes quicker drivers come through, that is pretty good currency. Hyman's, meanwhile, is all over the back of Darren Townsend, having had a bit of a contact with Johnny Sharp on the opening lap, I think. And I could be wrong on that, so please, if I am, do correct me. But Hyman's, having had a few issues there in the same vicinity as Johnny Sharp earlier on in the race, dropping out in the top 10, is now on the comeback trail. But Townsend, who was plays the long game a little bit more nowadays, is he going to be... He's not going to be waving him through, is he? That's Thomas Tierney behind him. Double T in the Aston Martin on debut. Still 3rd in silver, but he's dropped to 13th. He's ahead of Chris Gebman, who was 4th in silver last time in a roundabout way, it must be said. But he's now in 15th, ahead of Omar El Fadawi. El Fadawi, who's quick, but has been prone to the odd mishap, and so it's proved again in 16th. So, going to go back and see if we can find a battle. I think the battle at the moment is between that Clayton ahead. Yeah, Clayton's got about a second, doesn't he, on Andrew Eden, so nothing doing there. But Jordan Marshall is in he's in 23rd overall behind Michel van der Waal, but he is 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th in class. They've all got past, I think it's Greg Wood, who's had to come through the back again. Greg Wood in 4th in the AM class, and we'll see how that develops, because the Aston Martin, certainly piloted by the former commentator, has been in fine fettle when he's not been invalidating laps. As you can see there, the damage on Josh Clayton's Ford, it's been a pretty torrid time for Clayton, certainly this event, with the damage that befell him earlier on in race number 1. And as we can see now, I think someone else has dropped back. In fact, Hyman's dropped to that, because Marco Lino is to drop back. I know, unless somebody's disconnected, you've got Demian van der Waal. So Daniel Crossman's gone off and has been relieved of the lead. Demian van der Waal is now the leader. So I wonder if Crossman has been reeled in by van der Waal, who's opened the door for Jared Vermeulen. Vermeulen is in 2nd. So we're trying to see. I think it's Brustilli. Marcelin Brustilli has disappeared, because he was battling Gordon Brown for 5th. He is now completely off the radar. So we'll see if the Canadian doesn't appear to be in the session. So I suggest that he's either left or disconnected. But Marcelin Brustilli is out. And what was a promising race, certainly from his point of view, has gone rather to the wall. Because now you've got Owen Harris, who's just behind Marcel Basler. So Harris in 9th, leading the AM class, has got Darren Townsend behind, who's also got Wouter Hyman's behind him. It's going to be difficult for the AM drivers to stay in the top 10, with Hyman's certainly a very quick pedaler on his day. But what they have got is a big old gap over Dreadlock Steve in 3rd in the AM class. Steve is 18th on the road, and that looks to me to be about 6 or 7 seconds between them. So certainly it's all coming up Townsend and Harris, as Townsend now has to deal with Hyman's. Hyman's going to the inside, is he? No, not able to make a move there. Townsend's got a little bit too much pace over Hyman's on this lap around. As Hyman's kicks the back end out, does he? Certainly has a little bit of a crisscross moment in that Ferrari, which seems very difficult to do. But Townsend certainly keeping him at arm's length. Marcel Basler, meanwhile, 7 seconds off of the top. Well, I'd say the top group. It's not really the top group, is it? It's more like the second group, held up by Brown, who's doing rather well under the circumstances. But he has dropped back behind both Adam Sharp and Renard Serfontein. So the Scotsman has hit problems in the final sector. Could be Crocodiles, could be Cheetah Curve. But Gordon Brown, who was looking to make it 2 wins out of 2, unfortunately for him now, is in second place and he's staring at the back of Renard Serfontein. Serfontein now has to keep it sensible, not always traditionally attributed to him, as he's very much a race here and now type of driver, which is great for us commentators, but he's now got the chance to close out the victory, as we see that I think there was a lag spike that did for Johnny Sharp earlier on in the race. I wonder if that's what's caused his demise here tonight in the second race. It's Gordon Brown now. It's all over Serfontein like a cheap suit. So Brown certainly has the pace going into turn number 7, but not the position. Unfortunately, Serfontein, as far as the Scotsman is concerned, is not budging at this moment in time. What it has done is opened up the door for Adam Sharp, who's 8 seconds now behind Steve Desire, to try and get after the Dutchman. I don't think he's going to get on the podium because Van der Waal and Vermeulen, and we're going to have a look at the lead battle because it's starting to get interesting. But Van der Waal and Vermeulen are too far ahead, as Jan Vermeulen, speaking of being too far ahead, goes ahead of Damian Van der Waal. I think he's going to cede position because there was contact there. That's very sporting from the South African driver, but that's let Daniel Crossman get all onto the back. There's certainly some damage on the Ferrari. He went down the inside, and I think he was just a little bit too long on the brakes. If he'd have got it even slightly shorter, I think he'd have not made the contact and he'd have certainly got through. But very fair driving from the South African. That's what we like to see in Formula Racing League, as Van der Waal now has a positively balmy 0.7 of a second over the South African, with Daniel Crossman now way back in play. Steve Desire has ceded 4/10 to Adam Sharp, meanwhile, so we'll look at that battle a little bit later on as the battle of 4th hots up. Meanwhile, Darren Townsend still keeping Wouter Heijmans at bay in the top 10, which is good in terms of his overall, but even better because it means that the car in front is the car that's leading the class. Going to go back and see Josh Clayton, meanwhile, is once again in the pits with damage. That is the 4 drivers race pretty much done. Dreadlock Steve is currently in 19th and 3rd in the AM class, ahead of Greg Wood in 4th, who's got a bit of a lonely 4th at the moment, 22nd overall, and Jeffrey DeFast in 5th in AM. So that's the top 5 in AM, with Thomas Tierney dropping to 3rd in silver, ahead of Kalugi, Gebb and Lino, who make up the top 6 there. We're going to go back to Vermeulen, who's not 7/10 behind Van der Waal anymore, is he? He's going to have a look, I think, going into Nieuwkoop. But I think Van der Waal will go slightly wider there, but I think he's going to hang on because he has got the slightly better line on exit. But they go down the hill and through the mine shaft, and I think Vermeulen might just have another go down the inside going into Crocodile. So flat out left-hander. Is Vermeulen going to be able to make it down the inside? No, not quite. Van der Waal brakes later, but brakes too late, doesn't he? Because he's gone slightly wide, and that opens the door for Jared Vermeulen, and Vermeulen takes it with aplomb. So Vermeulen, having gone off earlier when leading, twice in a row in fact, has now got the chance to go and finally claim victory, with Van der Waal having outbraked himself going into the Crocodile corner. Van der Waal now having to fight with Daniel Crossman for second, as I think that should be Jared Vermeulen away and gone. It hasn't always worked out that way, but Vermeulen going into turn number 2 at Crowthorne, slightly wide there, so the Ferrari neither Ferrari particularly happy in these conditions as the rain starts to absolutely fall down. As they're coming up to what I think is Andrew Eden in the Lexus. No, it's not quite. No, it's not Eden, is it? That must be Jamie Thacker, who gets out of the way rather dutifully. And good driving there from the AM driver, who has obviously suffered not only with the problems in race number 1, where he was looking to lead, but the race 2, where again, from well placed, he's had further issues there. So a bit of a disastrous night for Jamie Thacker, who's done so well in terms of getting himself in position to win the AM race earlier on. It's all gone wrong since then, really, hasn't it? Meanwhile, speaking of the AM lead battle, we're going to go to Darren Townsend, because he's got Owen Harris just in front. Owen Harris, who crashed out with the lead earlier on through his means or through others. He's got a bit of a problem, isn't he? Because Darren Townsend is only half a second back. The 9th and 10th, which for an AM driver is pretty unheard of in a race such as this, where it's not a reverse grid race. But these two are more thinking about the fact that it's class lead, because Harris has got a bit of defending to do. He's half a second clear of Townsend, who's got, here on after the race, 21 minutes to make good on the obvious potential in that pink McLaren. But had a couple of issues in race number 3, race number 1 that saw him finish in 3rd and P3. He's got the chance to make amends. That's Ryan Fegan there, I think, in the Mercedes, who's caused about as few problems as he could possibly have caused for the leader anyway, but he does cause problems for Darren Townsend, I think, as he comes into the pits. I think he's recovering, is he? Or is he? No, he's just a lap down, unfortunately, getting right in the way of Townsend. One of those things, I think, with the way that the course goes, you can't play too much blame at Fegan, because whilst some might say that he has to stop, unfortunately, he's still got his own race to do. But Townsend losing about a second behind the Irishman, and that allows Harris to get away just for the moment. Meanwhile, out front, Daniel Crossman has dropped back from Van der Waal, who's not making an impression on Jaron Vermeulen at this moment in time. We'll keep an eye on that and see if Vermeulen has another whoops moment, because he's had a couple of those that you wouldn't normally associate. Speaking of, there's Vermeulen, not Vermeulen, there's Van der Waal, curb crambling and curb crawling all the way through the S's, and that's not going to do him any good. But he's not losing out too much to Crossman behind, who just fundamentally hasn't got the pace that he had in race number 1. So what was a leading position has been turned into 3rd position. Crossman there, but if he stays as consistent as he did, he's still got half a chance of finishing in that top 2, even if he is a bit more of an ever-distanced 3rd. Now you've got Steve Desert, who's only a couple of seconds back, isn't he, from Crossman? So Desert might fancy a run at 3rd position. He's got the pace over Adam Sharp. Adam Sharp struggling in that McLaren, although for his point of view, he's at least not in the Honda that beset him so many times last season with steering issues, handling issues. He's in 5th, a rather safe 5th, ahead of Renard Serfontaine. That was his lapping a driver there, so no dramas there. I think that was one of the AM Ferraris, of which there are plenty of Ferraris if you look through the field. You've got now Darren Townsend is caught right up back to Owen Harris. Harris has not shown the pace that he showed for elements of race number 1, and if Townsend's careful about this, he's got plenty of time to get this move done. He's got Wouter Heijmans and Johnny Sharp behind, and he's kept them at arm's length for most of the race. But Townsend now looking forwards rather than backwards in the slipstream, with the McLaren not the fastest in a straight line. He's going to have a look down the inside. Does he? No, not quite. Just a little peep rather than anything else. Although Harris does run wide, Townsend's now going to be side by side through turn number 3, going into turn 4. But Harris is the inside for the all-important middle right-hander, and that is that as far as this lap is concerned. Townsend remains in 10th and 2nd in the AM class. So Wouter Heijmans is just behind in 3rd. He's been he's displayed patience not seen before from the Dutchman, who's very much an all-action, do-it-now type racer in the fact that it's great for commentators, but can often lead him to have to charge through here. I think he was off not from his own fault on the first lap this time, but he's shown remarkable maturity compared to what has been seen previously. So there is a bit of personal growth there from Hal Heijmans, ahead of Sharp in 12th. Sharp looking a little bit bent in at the front, but not quite the same issues as was before with Thomas Tierney back. I think he's behind Omas El-Fadawi. El-Fadawi's got up into 13th, I think, but Tierney in 14th remains on the silver podium. So it would be a double silver podium as it stands at the moment, with Alexander Glugin now finally ahead of Chris Gebman. Chris Gebman dropping to 5th, but 16th overall will be fine for the silver driver. And the admin, who has gotten so much experience that he's seen everything all before, isn't he? I think Andrew Eden has dropped back, isn't he? He's dropped back to 18th. Marcolino is in 17th. He's 6th in class in the silver class. So Lino learning a new car. There should be fairly competitive once that gets going. Dreadlock Steve, meanwhile, third in the AM class. In the Aston Martin, and started to come under he's actually extended the gap over Jordan Marshall. Marshall 7th in silver, so was showing steady improvement from last season. The Frenchman, he's in 20th, so ahead of where he was previously with Michel van der Waal Senior. So whilst his son is battling for the lead, I say battling for the lead, he's now 2 seconds off the way, so you think he's probably dropped back and is going to settle for second at the moment. Van der Waal Senior is in 22nd and 8th in class, ahead of Richard Gearman, who's shown a lot more pace than this, so you can only assume that something has befallen the Dutchman in 23rd. Michael Coppens in 24th and 5th in the AM class. Lee Colbert in the BMW. It's not been the happiest of returns for him. The BMW, not the car of choice compared to the Ferraris, the McLarens, and even the Mercedes and Porsches, but Colbert, as ever, making things work. He's 9th in class, but the more mature drivers, I would suspect that if there's any issues ahead, he will be there to capitalise. You've got James O'Leary, the debutant in the McLaren, and it's as I've said before, it's a really tough league to debut in. So while they're not all going to go like Thomas Tierney's in third overall, third in the class and 14th overall, having been second in class earlier on. So we have to give a good word for James O'Leary, who's kept himself out of trouble so far in 26th and deserves credit for continuing to get around, because it's not an easy league and certainly not an easy series to debut in. Meanwhile, Wouter Heymans has got past Aaron Townsend, as has Johnny Sharp. So I wonder if Townsend they're playing the long game there, but he has been overtaken by both Heymans and Johnny Sharp across the line. So Heymans now is going to go after Owen Harris. Harris has half a second ahead of Heymans, with Sharp only 0.6 of a second further back there. Renat Serfontaine, meanwhile, still retains the lead at the silver. We'll go back to that a little bit later on. As Sharp goes wide there, that's Elfrid Dowie through ahead of Johnny Sharp. So Johnny Sharp going a little bit long on the brakes once again in that Ferrari, and Omas Elfrid Dowie passes him. And as he stayed. He had been in front, so it's remarkable from Sharp to recover there. Mind you, he did have the inside, but it looked for the world as if both he and Townsend were ahead of Sharp. That's Tierney going around the outside. He's made friends with the outside curb there a little too often for his liking in the second round, with Kalugin now, who went bowling a bit, didn't he, at the top of the hill in the first race. He just kicked the tail out then. Russian sending a bit of a rocket and causing all that chaos in the first round, but kicking the back end out just a little bit there, and remains in 4th in silver. It's been a quick return. He certainly looks a lot quicker than the last time he was in silver. So Kalugin there showing a bit of development in the silver class. Now we'll be hoping to round that off with a podium. Now Serfontaine was 0.2 of a second clear of Brown, but Brown looks like he's dropped back a second, isn't he? 1.2 seconds away, with them following Adam Sharp, who's not been as quick as perhaps we all thought he would be, certainly in the second race. So the Yorkshireman there in a solid 5th position. I think it will have to be a solid 5th position, because he's not been able to make an impact on Steve Desire. Mind you, Steve Desire is in the car of choice, isn't he? Look at that, 7 Ferraris in the top 8. And I think that's going to be a sign of things to come, with further Ferraris in 10th, 11th and 13th. It's only 3 non-Ferraris within that top 13. It's certainly a bit of a worry if you're not one of those. And even then, they're 3 McLarens. So you have to go back to Thomas Tierney for something that's not a Ferrari or a McLaren. So let's go and have a look, see if we can pick up Wouter Heymans on his battle with Owen Harris. Harris isn't going to play too hard, I wouldn't have thought, because obviously this isn't class related, and we'll talk about the class related again. For those of you who weren't around earlier on, or those of you who are new, your class is determined by the shade that shade of the blocked out bit in the background of your number. So if you're Jared Vermeulen or Damien van der Waal, yours is like a light white silver. That means that you're in pro, you're in the top tier, and you're sitting at the table of the big boys. As we're going to have to pause this commentary, because Wouter Heymans has got a run on Owen Harris, and that's candy from a baby. He's gone into 9th position. Won't worry Harris too much, but Harris getting a little bit out of shape at the S's, and he drops to 10th, and the Dutchman goes up into 9th. A mature drive to recover from earlier problems, and he is now 9th, although now we're going to look to Johnny Sharp, who's going to try and make the move into the Crocodile Bend. That's what claimed his race earlier on, but nothing doing there for Johnny Sharp in car number 69 in the Ferrari. And it's handy for Harris to have him there, because if he's got a Sharp there, he's got a bit of a barrier to not only Darren Townsend, but Omad El Fidawi. So Townsend is the main focus for Harris, in that he's second in the AM class. But El Fidawi, who can be he can certainly be a combative driver, and his reputation preceded him with the stewards last season, but he has so far calmed it down just a little bit. So if El Fidawi can keep that going, then I think we've got a quick driver in there. We've got a good race driver in there, but he's having a little attack on Darren Townsend, but not able to make the moves. They'll go line astern through the first corner. That's Tierney in the background with Kalugin, who've both gotten away from Chris Gebman in 16th in the Porsche. The elder statesman, one of the elder statesmen of the championship, Chris Gebman, driving a solid, if unspectacular race, but keeping himself out of trouble, as he often seems to do. So we were talking about the classes a little bit earlier on. So if your number, like Vermeulen, like Van der Waal, and like Prosper, for example, is off goes Johnny Sharp, one of the pro drivers sitting at the top table, and he's walled it. He's nosed it into the wall. I think too much curb on the outside of the Sunset Bend, and that is game over for the Ferrari, pretty much. Look at the damage on the back of that car. Look at the damage on the front of that car. That's turning right and right only. And once again, Johnny Sharp ends his race in the pits, and that's disaster for the Englishman. It's also bad news for Owen Harris, because he's now not got that buffer between himself and Darren Townsend. As Omad El Fidawi still hasn't gone past Harris. Harris is 8/10 of a second now clear of Darren Townsend, and I think this one will run and run. Now, I will get my point out about the pros and the AMs and the silvers. If you're like Adam Sharp, who we're running on board with at this moment in time, if you've got a white or light background, that means you're in pro. That means that you're at the top tier, and you're one of the standard setters in terms of etiquette and pace in the pro class. If you're silver, like Renat Sterfontaine, who we've just switched to now, that means that you're in the medium class. So if you're thinking about it like Curry's, it's going from a Jalfrezi to a Madras. And if you're in the AM class, then you've more of a corner. But as we can see now, certainly much more spicier battle than a corner. Going down into the inside, that is Darren Townsend. Can he make the move? No, he can't. But what he can do is hit the back of Owen Harris. He's not waiting yet, as Harris tries to get out of the way, and he's not waited. So I think the Welshman feels that that's not on him. Harris has lost the lead so far of the AM class, but Townsend there having knocked him out of the way. I think it's fair to say Harris is second overall, so it's not going to be, or second in class, so it's not going to be too bad for him, but obviously it's disappointing for him to lose the lead in that manner. It's also helped Alexander Kalugin get past Thomas Tierney, as Tierney had to scatter to avoid the stricken Harris, and Harris, who will not be happy at the way in which that was taken from him, is in 14th. He's got Chris Gebman behind him with I think that's a Mustang there, who's a lap down, so no need to worry there. But Chris Gebman in a 15th has got past and back ahead of Marco Linos. Marco Linos been off and in the wars. I think they were the other way around, weren't they? But Chris Gebman now up into 5th in the championship. As I can see there's a Ferrari. Is that Omad El Fidawi? I think that's El Fidawi, who's recovering from a spin. Yes, it is. So El Fidawi, the Italian, has dropped back as well. So it's cost him nothing in terms of class position. He's already behind Wouter Heijmans, but he drops to 13th, 14th, 15th. And that is horrendous news for Omad El Fidawi, who's had a pretty difficult start to his full-time Formula Racing League career. And the Italian there in all sorts of trouble, back in 15th. Wouter Heijmans, meanwhile, wondering what all the fuss is about. And there's Darren Townsend having, he's having taken the lead. He's now got to get away from Kalugin and Tierney because Harris is only 5 seconds behind, and he'll need, I suspect, to put a bit more distance between himself and Harris in order for that not to rear its head with the stewards. Now, Kalugin is in third on his return or his promotion to the silver class, with Thomas Tierney in fourth after second earlier on. That will represent a rather excellent start to his Formula Racing League career, and I can't emphasise this enough. It is a really difficult league in which to debut in, and he's handled it very, very well indeed. So the Irishman, certainly one to watch for the future, and certainly a shout for the driver of the day from the silver class. We go to the lead battle now, and it's not a battle as Vermeulen appears to have gone back to the Jared Vermeulen matrix. He's 5.5 seconds clear of Demian van der Waal. Van der Waal himself having put a bit of distance between himself and Crossman, although Sieg Desert is only 4 seconds behind Daniel Crossman. So Crossman has got a bit to think about. I wonder if it might be tyre pressure related, because he certainly had the pace, didn't he, in race number one, but it was just a little bit drier. But Crossman struggling a bit, it has to be said, in the heavier wets, and he was leading early, and mostly by default, for the fact that a couple of others have gone off. Now, we don't know if there's any damage or anything else afflicting that Ferrari, but the pace isn't there compared to earlier in the race. Now, Vermeulen, obviously, a bit of a difficult yardstick to really measure yourself up against, isn't it? But Jared Vermeulen, obviously, mostly Mr. Reliable. He obviously has been prone to a couple of mistakes today, but he's got 5 seconds on Van der Waal. Van der Waal himself having been a fairly quick peddler in the past and shown that again, but Crossman there will wonder quite where that pace has gone, but he'll be pleased if it stays like this for the first and a third on his return to the Sunday Championship. Sieg Desert, meanwhile, handling his promotion up to the Pro class very, very well indeed. He was quick earlier on, and in fourth position, he's left Adam Sharp, who's one of the more established pro drivers in the shade. We'll see if there's any damage from Adam Sharp or not, because he's normally a little bit quicker than this. I don't know whether it might be setup related. He was struggling a little bit with understeer earlier on in practice, he reported, so I wonder if it might be a carry on from that. He's got Bernard Serfontaine and Gordon Brown behind. Brown, who's another shout for the silver driver of the day with the first and the second so far. He is another one that's fallen by the wayside just a little bit as the rain has fallen. We've got 5 minutes to go, would you believe? It's gone very, very quickly, which with not many battles, I think I can just see Andrew Eden having a go on Marco Lynn. It's time for me to talk to you a little bit more about the sponsor. So we said it's SIMNET. They are the lead really for anything sort of sim rig related, so whether that's boots, whether that's gloves, whether that's anything to do with steering wheel or sim. As off goes Owen Harris. We'll come back to the sponsor chat just a little bit later on. He's gone off and into the wall. Don't think it's going to cost him any positions in the AM class, but a rather disappointing end has gotten just a little bit more disappointing for the Englishman, who will feel that he deserved to win the class. He's now behind what I think is Jordan Marshall. And he's got a bit of time between himself and Dreadlock Steve. That looks to me to be about 6 seconds, 5 seconds it is. So he should still take second, but hopes of regaining that lead in the AM class from Darren Townsend, unfortunately, have been extinguished in the rain in Kyalami. Now Dreadlock Steve having a go again as Greg Wood, who's probably the outright, has more trouble ahead. That's Owen Harris again, off and round. That's more misery there for the Englishman, but also Omar El Fidawi is again off and into the weeds as well. So Dreadlock Steve now moves up into second, and Owen Harris has dropped to third position. Disastrous lap for Owen Harris. He's been spun round twice. He's got a front bonnet that's up and in the air almost, and that is not what the McLaren driver wanted to see. Dreadlock Steve now moves into second, whereas he was rostrum or hospital. A little bit more consistent this time around from Dreadlock Steve in second in the AM class, but Owen Harris must wonder whether he's walked on crack or stepped on cracked and walked under ladders, because having led earlier in race number 1 in the AM class, having led earlier in race number 2 in the AM class, he's going to finish with damaged cars in both of them, and only most likely a third position. He's got his friend and colleague, really, Greg Wood, coming up behind him. I don't think he'll catch him quickly enough, but That is not Waters. Darren Townsend is now spun, and even more galling for Owen Harris because Townsend has been hit by Kalugin. So Kalugin, a bit of interclass battery there from the Russian, going down the inside into Neukope. Townsend's able to recover, and he's only down to 11, so he's lost his top 10 overall. But he's still got the lead of the AM class overall, so he's just behind Thomas Tierney. Now, if he keeps it sensible, as he nearly runs into the back of the Irishman, you don't want to be doing that, Darren. Townsend there actually also has gone off again because he's hit the inside curb at Cheetah Curve. He's now got to bring that car home. Calm yourself down, Darren, because you are in the lead of the AM class and you've got an absolute street between yourself and Dreadlock Steve. So should be okay for him to win on the road. He's now got Chris Gebman behind. Gebman not a man to be getting involved in any silly games with 2.5 minutes to go. So I think we should be fine there. Jared Vermeulen, meanwhile, has built a big old gap over Demian van der Waal with Daniel Crossman. Only a couple of tenths at the moment behind Demian van der Waal. I was about to call him Derian. That doesn't really work, does it? Demian van der Waal in second position. Must wonder what's happened there because he's 11.5 seconds back as Vermeulen is going to start his final lap in about 20 seconds. So as he goes through the final corner, is it going to be the final lap? I would have thought it would be. He doesn't really need to start another one, does he? So he's in the heavy rain. I think we should just about be on the final lap with Vermeulen now crossing the line with about 1 minute 43 to go. That's just about it in the dry race, isn't it? So yeah, we're on the final lap now, and the South African Jared Vermeulen looks like he's going to right the wrong, but the battle for second looks to be hotting up all of a sudden. As Crossman, I say that, Crossman drops a couple of tenths further back behind Van der Waal, so whatever issues it was with the Dutchman, they do appear to have corrected themselves. So slightly wide through turn number 2 at Crowthorne, but that's not going to be an issue. He's got Steve Desert a little bit further back. Desert not really in the running for the podium. His podium challenge has been extinguished just about. But it's still going to be a pretty impressive start as drive-through penalty for speeding the pit line. That's car number 23. That is Jordan Marshall. So the Frenchman, it all going wrong for the Frenchman there. He's got moral support from his wife as well. But unfortunately for the Frenchman, it's not going his way in race number 2. He's out behind James O'Leary. And I think it's only going to be Maximilian Morley-Vega, who's had a torrid evening, that he finishes ahead of. So we go to the battle. It's closer than it perhaps was, but Van der Waal, I think, has got it covered as he's 12 seconds back from Vermeulen, but he is just ahead of Daniel Crossman, who's not able to make his stick this time around, and it's going to have to be third for the young Brit. Now, as we do have a look at, I think Vermeulen's going to cross the line, so we're going to have a look at the leader and his crowning moment, as I think Owen Harris has dropped back behind, he still remains behind Dreadlock Steve, but we're not going to focus on that for the moment. We're going to focus on a return to winning ways for Jared Vermeulen. He's going to come across the line and take the checkered flag after 40 minutes of toil. South African comes back out on top, and normal service is resumed for Jared Vermeulen. He wins and takes the win ahead of Demian van der Waal with Daniel Crossman finishing third. So a first and a third for Daniel Crossman on his return to the championship. Excellent driving all round. Steve Desert takes an impressive fourth position. Then we have to wait a few seconds for Adam Sharp to come out of the final corner in the first of the non-Ferraris. He will take fifth in his McLaren, with Renard Serfontaine completing a class victory in the silver class ahead of Gordon Brown, who's got first and second to get his championship challenge off to the right start. Marcel Basler is going to come through to take sixth in the pro class and eighth overall, ahead of the recovering Wouter Heijmans in seventh and ninth respectively. Thomas Tierney is going to complete 2 podiums on debut. He was second earlier on. He's going to finish in third here with problems for Kalugin a little bit earlier on. So Tierney takes third position and 10th overall. Third in silver, 10th overall. That is a perfect way almost for the Irishman to start his Formula Racing League career. Darren Townsend will take the win on the road in the AM class. He finishes 11th ahead of Chris Gebman in 12th. The experienced Scotsman coming through into the top 12 ahead of Andrew Eden and Alexander Kalugin, the Russian in the wars, costing himself a podium with that contact with Townsend earlier on. Marcolino is in 15th ahead of Dreadlock Stevens, 16th and third in the second in the AM class. Omat Elfidali will come across the line in 17th ahead of Greg Wood. So Owen Harris has hit further problems, and Greg Wood pretty much a shoe-in for the driver of the day in the AM class. In 18th, Richard Gearman is in 19th ahead of Michal van der Waal, with Owen Harris in 4th. What was looking like a win in the AM class has ended in disappointing fashion. He's ahead of Michael Coppens and Lee Colpitts in 23rd ahead of Josh Clayton, who's going to be the last across the line, with James O'Leary, Jordan Marshall, Jack Barnett, Miguel Silva, Maximilian Morniveg, Ryan Fegan and Darren Mark Davies among those to have been lapped or crashed, with Leon Kruger and the luckless Jamie Thacker in 33rd overall. Now, we'll wait a little while for any potential interviews because you can see there Johnny Sharp, Jeffrey DeFast, Mark Lindbrush, Tully, Paul Trotman, Liam Richings, Fabio Travaglioli and Backlav Pospisil are the other non-finishers. We'll wait about 5 minutes for any potential interviews. It used to be last season. Regular viewers will remember that it was the Jared Vermeulen podcast, so we'll see if that comes to fruition again a little bit later on this in the broadcast. If it doesn't, then we'll sign off there, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about our sponsors, because what I was trying to say before I was rudely interrupted by an accident was that the sponsors tonight, and indeed for the past few seasons, has been SIMNET. So if you want any kind of sim racing accessories, from boots, gloves, if you're into that sort of thing, or all the way through to the gear in terms of the sim rig, then SIMNET is the place to go. As I said, it was formerly the Jared Vermeulen podcast. Here he comes. Doesn't disappoint. Jared, you proved that you were human, didn't you, in race number 1, because you were winning and then you weren't, and that's a very rare thing to happen. So talk us through what happened in race number 1, first of all.
Race number 1, it was coming up to some back markers, and 2 of them battling for position. So I went, tried to go around them, and then I touched the outside curb, so it just, spun me out. So it's on me, right? That's on me. Like I called it in chat, that's a New Year's mistake. I haven't been driving for a couple of weeks, so that's on me. But it's okay. I still, luckily, I still finished second, so it's not the end of the world, and I had the fastest lap, so yeah.
Do you feel that it's perhaps the kind of mistake that wouldn't have been punished last season? Do you think it's a bit tighter at the top of the pro class now?
I think there were many factors in that race. I mean, people's pressures as well. I mean, mine were 53 psi. So I think everyone, was in between pressures. I think I made a big mistake. So that did hurt my pace. But I do think, yes, this race, it was closer. And obviously we didn't have Travioli because I think he had a back qualify.
Yes.
So he would have been up there as well. And I think he would have been closer. He would have punished me for both of my mistakes today. I will talk to you a little bit more about race number 2 shortly, but we have got the AM driver man of the moment, which is Greg Wood. Greg, you were quick in welcome to the commentary box once again. It's a pretty weird thing for me to be interviewing you, but we'll go with it because you were quick, obviously, in practice. You said that it was the cheetah curb that caught you out. When you're starting 40th, do you envisage that you're going to finish first in a 20-minute race in the class, and do you then envisage that you're going to get on the podium in the second race?
Well, I take the advantages I can from starting last. Obviously, you avoid a lot of the initial twos and fro's of the opening lap, and I did for the most part. Did get caught up in second corner collisions, but managed to carry on. In the first race, it just sort of came towards me. With the crash that happened in the first few corners, gave me a lot of easy positions, and then Thacker was really tough to chase down. I feel sorry for him. I have looked on my replay. I'm not going to reveal it on here because I imagine it's going to go to the stewards, but from what I can tell, I don't believe I'm at fault for that. So I think I will get to hold on to that one. But he was tricky. His conditions were tricky, and the changeable weather in the first one, I think, helped me a little bit at the beginning, and then my tyres really started overheating towards the end. So it was important when I did to get that overtake done, albeit the expense of Thacker in the end. In the second race, I was well on for a win, I think, if I just hadn't messed up qualifying once again, invalidated after taking Cheetah Curve a bit too hard. I did come through, noticed a few people did spin off, have issues, but there did seem to be a good Silver and Ampac sort of cushioning and keeping Dreadlock Steve well away from me. And unfortunately, Harris obviously came to his own problems. I was in chat with him this evening, and he was experiencing some loss of gears. So, unfortunate for him that he couldn't hold on to that. I'm sure he would have come home with a win with those things permitting. Me and him are quite equal on pace. But obviously, we've had changeable fortunes this evening. But yeah, I was really, really happy with the pace tonight. I mean, like I heard Jasmine say just then, I mean, pressures were all over the place. In the first race, my pressures were in the 34s. In the second race, I was in the 28s.
Do you think when it's, and I'll throw this question to both of you, do you think when it's a little bit more greasy, obviously, you know, when it's not quite as settled in terms of whether it's dry or wet, how much more difficult does it get to set up your car in terms of tyre temperatures and tyre pressures?
For me, I mean, I always seem to manage to get my tyres pretty hot. I never really struggle. I think it's just driving style allows me to usually put in an extra, like, 0.5 of pressure in the way I drive. So I can set mine a little bit lower, and then that helps me keeping that. So I sort of manage my tyres around that. So I do have a bit of a playability, and then if it does start to dry up, I can drive accordingly. So it's not, as long as you've got a broad enough window to operate in, it can work. But obviously, if you're a bit inexperienced, maybe you're already too far out on your pressures, and obviously you're doubling down on what issues you have. I imagine someone like Jared has got a very wide operating window for these conditions.
Yeah, you know, you have to drive a bit differently when they go up to 33 PSI. But overall, like I said, it was costing me probably like half a second at that time max. It wasn't really a big deal. You know, it wasn't like a make or break. You know, normally the pressures in those conditions, it's nice to have them correct. The car just behaves better. You know, the higher you go, the rear starts to do some interesting things.
And I think my last question is regarding the race 2 setup. Obviously, you've now got a lot less in terms of waiting time because of the lack of reverse grid. Tell me what the pros and cons are. Tell me how you guys both feel, obviously come from possibly different sides of the track, about it not being there. And tell me what differences it makes to how you plan for race number 2.
I'll go first on that one. For me, I just use the same setup. Which, in hindsight, I maybe should have knocked down one click on the rear, because I still don't know what happened. Went into the fast left and right hand kink before the hairpin, and she just went round on me. Like, never happened in practice. So that was I think probably I had too much wing, too much. Same.
And for me, obviously, this is my first race, SuperSprint Sunday. I've never actually got to experience the reverse grid as a driver. But from what I've seen over the years and commentating with you, Jack, and with Owen as well, is obviously both provide opportunities. And I very much would have liked a shot at actually showing what pace I did have in a bit more clean air, not having to come through the slower cars in the pack, respectfully. And yeah, just sort of drive only falling back to as fast or as slow as I was, because there definitely was a few drivers tonight I knew I was faster than, but the conditions were just way too tricky. I think I'm going to find myself in the steward's room a little bit this evening, but I think a lot of it can be chopped up to difficulty of conditions. I think a few crossing lines, people losing their nose and maybe wandering over the track where they didn't mean to. But this is racing. The stewards all look it over and hopefully all comes to the correct conclusion.
Okay, well done to you too, and well done to all the other drivers that took part, because it's such a difficult set of conditions to judge. I think that's going to be time, lads, gentlemen. It's a bit of an early finish, obviously, with the lack of waiting around. I think we've taken half an hour off, so you can all get a little bit more, a little bit better sleep tonight. Well done once again. That is your winner from race number 2 in the Pro class, Jared Vermeulen, and a double podium, including a race win in the AM class, Greg Wood. Just enough time for me to say thank you so much for joining me. I've been Jack Prentice, and we will see you again next week for round number 2. Take care. Bye-bye.